was some kind of a balance.
Well, I enjoyed both days immensely. I thought the scenery was terrific. I thought the organization was terrific. The safari class, being able to stop for photos and stop for tacos and, stop for whatever we wanted to stop for was a great way to see this event. Tell me, Eliseo, I know a little bit about your history and your father's history because he's been the Grand Marshal for this event, for the 50th anniversary of this event. Your father, way back in 1967, was he the Secretary of Tourism for Ensenada? Do I have that right?
Well, he was the Secretary of Tourism for the state of Baja, California.
Oh, the state of Baja.
Yes.
Okay. What did he think when he was approached about doing this brand new thing called off-road racing?
Well, somehow it was like, according to what he's always told us, the first time that he met Mike's father, Ed, it was because they were looking for somehow a link or somebody that will help them to get all the permits they needed to put on the first Mexican 1000 in 1967. Ed came down in 66 with his FJ40, which you've seen Mike's FJ40. That's exactly the same one. Dick Sepek was also a close friend of Ed, and they did this record attempt, and they failed. They couldn't beat the motorcycles, and somehow they got also addicted to it and said, you know what, we have to come back and make this open to anyone that wants to take the challenge, and we'll just ask for a little money and we can use that money to make a big party in La Paz at the end. My father, at that time, he was in the office working, and he got the call from Don Francisco, which was Ed's partner in NORRA at the very beginning, and he got asked to meet with them. They explained basically all of what they wanted to do. At that same time, there were local clubs doing motorcycle races here in Ensenada, and the off-road, how do you say it? The off-road addiction was kind of starting also for locals. So he knew a little bit about it, and he just got amazed on how quick it went from 80-something entries to 400 entries in just a few years, 2 or 3 years. But it was a very good thing for him, because he really got to manage. Ed, for example, didn't have a specific date, and he said, okay, when can we do the event? And it's like, okay, we got the slowest month after the big vacation months of July and August is November. And I think that's a good month because the hotels need people to come down and stay there. So I think the event will help Ensenada. And it's still, that's the main reason why the Baja 1000 right now is made in November, because that was the month when Ensenada needed to be visited.
Well, I love it. And the weather's good, in Baja almost the entire year round. So any time is a good time. We did the Baja XL in January, and it was a little cold. End of January, beginning of February, it was a little bit cold, but not too bad. And we had a great time. In November, I would imagine the weather would be spectacular.
Yeah.
Maybe a little cold up in the high
rainy,
elevation.
But that is, I think, talking about the Baja 1000, that's part of the magic of Ensenada. Basically, when we are getting close to the Baja 1000, it starts getting kind of colder or chilly, and you wake up in the morning and you're just looking at, it smells like a Baja 1000 because the weather is kind of getting colder and colder.
Gotcha. Okay. So the Eliseo, you came to this naturally with your father being involved in the first one. So when NORRA restarted the Mexican 1000, that was, 11 years ago or so?
It was in 2010. The original plan was to do that in 2009. I knew Mike for a long time because he was a friend of my father also, and his father also. So we met. I think it was a few years before when Ed passed, and also after that we met with at Don Francisco's Memorial at the NHRA Museum in Pomona. When we met for the first time but we met for the second time, and we said we have to do something to honor Ed and Don because of what they did. By that time, Mike Novell, which was he is Don Francisco's nephew, he said, I would like to spread my uncle's ashes all over Baja because he always was there and his life was there and he really loved it. So why don't we do one single event to spread my uncle's ashes in Baja and get some sort of a honor run for Ed and Don about the NORRA events. So we just planned to do one in 2009. And when we started doing it, we said, okay, we would like to do a vintage event to highlight the vintage and to try to get as many vintage cars that raced back in the day with them to be racing again here. We started making phone calls, and we had basically the event scheduled to be done in October 2009. It was the end of September, beginning of October. But then a big storm and hurricane came down to Baja and practically destroyed San Ignacio and hit a lot of the roads, and it was really, really bad. So we had to cancel and postpone it for 2010. And that's when we did the very first event in April. And we got stuck to it. After we did the first one, a lot of people started asking about the next year and talking about who will be coming for the next year and who's going to be invited for the next year, and that's when we got requested to do it again, and from there we haven't stopped.
Well, we were talking a little bit before we started rolling here about my experience racing the La Carrera Panamericana, and in that first race with my buddy Ted, who I did the Mexican. The NORRA Mexican 500 with in October, we were so out of our league. We had no idea what we were doing, and we had no business being in a race car in Veracruz or in Oaxaca or wherever that, the 3,000 miles that race went. And we were laughing all the way, and we said, if we ever figure this out, if we ever figure out the La Carrera, the next thing we need to do is get into a Class 11 Beetle and try the Baja 1000. And so it was right after, 2008, I did the La Carrera again and had an absolutely flawless run, and I heard about NORRA. And so I said, well, heck, I've got a 1967 Datsun. Datsuns ran in the desert racing, not a Datsun Roadster like I was racing, but Datsun 510s and Datsun pickup trucks. So I called Pete Brock, and I said, hey, Pete, is there any chance that I can Can I convert my Datsun Roadster into an off-road racer and run this brand new NORRA vintage Mexican 1000? And he said, absolutely not. Even though they have drive-arounds and other routes that will be easier, there's absolutely no way that your little Datsun Roadster, and of course he was the guy who raced Roadsters and won national championships with Datsun Roadsters on road courses in the 60s. He said there's absolutely no way that car can do it. So, I filed it away, and then fast forward to January a year ago when we ran into you guys, and you said, hey, we have this new class. We have this new class for street legal vehicles. You should bring your 50-year-old truck and do it. And, I thought, hey, we should. And we had a great time. And thanks to Fortaleza Tequila, we had a really good time.
Okay. Well, basically, that's the main idea of the safari expedition. When you hear the word safari, you always think about Africa and going either hunting or shooting with a camera certain animals. and having an adventure. Well, basically, at NORRA, I think that we're not in Africa, we're in Mexico, but it's a really nice place to be. Definitely you will have an adventure, and I think that the animals are driving race cars. So
that's a great analogy. That's an absolutely great analogy. I think you're correct.
You will be able to shoot someone if they hit you, or maybe to shot with a camera a nice picture of a race car.
Yeah,
so
of 14-year-old Jack's Redline with four tires off the ground.
Yes. So basically, I think you will have a nice safari run. Different kind of animals, different kind of scenery, but it is a safari. It is an adventure, and we always try to look for the nicest places on the course for safari to go in. Definitely, you will not be driving the entire Mexican 1000 course because you will not be able to do that on a street legal car, but definitely you will have the most fun of it. You will be able to drive the nicest section of the day, and at the end of the day, you will be sharing the finish line with all the drivers and have the same experience, and even sit right next to Jack's Redline or Robbie Gordon or
Larry Ragland. Yeah, exactly.
Any of those legends that had to drive a really fast car and get there basically at the same time that you got to the finish line, and have a nice glass of Fortaleza tequila, or have a nice beer, or just a nice plate of paella, or any kind of food that Pepe is going to prepare for us every day at the end of the day.
Yeah, and let's talk about that a little bit, because again, it was a 2-day fiesta, and I can't imagine how great the week-long fiesta is for the Mexican 1000 coming up in April. Pepe, you must go through some real logistical work to be able to pull off these events and to provide the caliber and quality of food and drink. I mean, it seemed very seamless as a new participant, but there must be an awful lot of behind-the-scenes work. And I know you and Eliseo both looked exhausted at the finish ceremonies.
Yeah, it's kind of a rough task to do, but it's a great one also. There's months of planning, and the first time I did it, it was like, oh my God, I got into what? How am I going to be able to pull it off? Moving every day on an airplane, landing first, and getting there, what to expect. But everything went smooth. There was a lot of planning, a lot of work done. And so now, like Eliseo said before, it's everything goes smoothly. We know what to do, when to do it, how to do it. And of course, still a lot of work behind. But at the end of the day, what we will try to do is get everybody that is involved in the race, have a great time, be able to talk to who you ran into in the course, helped out, whatever, and talked about all the situations that happened in the course. And so we get a nice parties afterwards, finish line celebrations, good food from each town, San Felipe, Bay of LA, Loreto. And so at the end of the day, and the race, it all comes to the big fiesta, the big party, the award ceremony that it's in Cabo, and it's also a great event. And I think people enjoy every part of it, every aspect of the race, including, of course, the finish line celebration. And it's hard work, but we love doing it.
So, Eliseo, explain to me, for the folks who maybe don't know how the Mexican 1000 works. Unlike the Baja 1000, you don't drive all night in this event. You drive several days. Is it 5 days or 7 days? And you stop every night, and there's a party every night, and you're in a hotel every night, unless you're in Bahia de Los Angeles and you haven't signed up early enough, and then you're camping. But essentially, this is a very civilized way to go very fast in the dirt and then have a bed at night. Yes,
exactly. The main reason why we planned this event to be a rally raid stage event was exactly that. We don't need another Baja 1000 point-to-point race, because I think